Um, I would note that on this panel here, we have two scientists and we have me. And I'm not a scientist. I'm a writer and self-styled researcher, and I'm less qualified than they are to estimate what will happen in 20 years or 30 years. But I'll note that the precautionary principle, I just scribbled down the definition here, if I could read my writing, where there are threats of serious irreversible damage, lack of full scientific certainty shall not be used as a reason for postponing cost-effective measures to prevent environmental degradation. Well, we have to have a degree of humility. We don't know exactly what the state of the world will be if we keep functioning the way we're functioning now as a civilization in 20 or 30 years. But all indications point that things will just get worse. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere goes up every year. We have a terrible problem with methane in the atmosphere. And we have more and more ferocious storms. So the precautionary principle would tell us, if we can't know with certainty what's going to happen, let's do all cost-effective measures to try to mitigate the damage. And in the history of civilization, I can't think of a more cost-effective measure than eating beans instead of beef. So that's what I'm here to argue for, that we are risking all this damage to the planet in order to eat beef that's giving us heart attacks. So it's just, it's beyond foolish to use the planet this way. 40% of the non-ice land surface of the Earth and all of the oceans, which is 70% of the Earth, devoting them to eating animals.
Yeah, somebody wrote in the comments. I've been following the comments, and some of them are very interesting. Somebody sort of declared unilaterally the carbon tax is nothing but a redistribution of wealth. Not really. I mean, it's a nice, pithy way to summarize the problem. It suffers from one limitation, and that is that it is incorrect. In other words, we don't know because there is no carbon tax, but suppose we were to tax emissions, it would not be a wholesale transformation of wealth from one group to another. No, it will be a wholesale taxing of those who emit the most. And what can rationally be argued against slapping those who contribute the most to a particular problem with the highest price tag? That seems to be the most logical thing that a society can do to defend itself under the guise of the precautionary principle. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Steve, just to give a little bit of information on your question about what's going to happen in coming decades. The face of climate change right now, the human face, is in climate refugees. Now, since the turn of the century, we've had about 20 million climate refugees per year. Most of them are within their continent, most in Africa, in fact, sub-Saharan Africa. They have to move from where they are. But it comes back to your point, Professor Eshel, about the wealth of that society. The millennium drought in the Middle East led to the Syrians having to walk off their land. They had no social support system, and they had no rain, and they had no crops, nothing to feed their families. What do? Now, the hardest thing for people to do is to leave their home, to walk away from their home. That's probably the hardest thing to do on earth. And yet they did it. And that caused enormous strife when they tried to go to Europe just for food. So this is happening, 20 million a year. Last year it spiked. There were nearly 100 million. So what that's the face of the future. And we can't say, oh, that's a third world problem, because we are so interlinked now. The climate refugees lead to conflict, no question about that. Conflict leads to armed conflict. In the Middle East, this was the Sunni and the Shiites coming together in the cities because they couldn't live on the land, and that all the conflict that caused. And it just goes on. So if we are to create a planet for ourselves and for future generations, I hate to think what our grandchildren will have to put up with. The world is changing. Can we just blithely ignore it and go to the supermarket and still pretty much buy whatever we want? Or can we accept the responsibility that we are part of this world? We cannot say, not my problem anymore. We are part of this, and we do have a responsibility to future generations. I mean, oldies like me, we're almost done. We had it all. We had it all growing up in the 60s. Wow. This world has been incredible. But now I realize that there are consequences. And so, it's just a matter of us growing up. We've got to take responsibility for ourselves. And I think we will all do that, because I believe humans are slow but not stupid. So we will come to our senses, I'm sure.
Just quickly, the obvious problem to all these things is someone is going to sell less of something if we make a change. And if you convince everyone to make a change in their diet, the people who sell the products that are no longer being eaten, the beef industry, the dairy industry, the fish industry, they're going to use their resources to try to stop that. And that seems to be why, so I don't know how to solve that, but how do you solve that if to make this happen, someone's got to go out of business? So what do you do about that?
I find it most unpersuasive. Before I became a scientist, I was a professional deep sea diver. I raised cattle in northern Israel. I spent years biking across the world. A person can do more than one thing, and well, okay? And if you no longer can sell product X, really? Can you not ever sell product Y? Is it just so different an art of selling X versus Y that you cannot, and you just throw your hands in the air and say, I am bereft because my livelihood is lost? No, we see perfectly well that those, let's say, among coal miners who are willing to take the additional training that is offered to them and then transition to, let's say, wind or solar industries, they do far better without the lung cancer than they did earlier. So I find it hard to believe that some people would like us to believe that they are so rigid and so incapable that they can only do one thing, and if that thing is no longer viable, they're lost. That's absurd.
Okay. So an unbelievable movie came out called Eating Our Way to Extinction. And it was, a incredible thing. All these facts came together. It was made with the highest quality and the best actors. It was an unbelievable moment. And I saw it and I thought, okay, it's out there now. And now everyone could see this. So, Gerard, what happened? What was the response? What did the politicians say? What did the scientists say? What did the public say? Do we need to make a part 2? I mean, you did it. We put all this together and you made the incredible movie. What was the result and what was the impact and what do we need to do next?
Yeah, it actually has had quite an impact. It's had 10 million views on all the different platforms now. And they've made just 2 months ago, they made a short 36-minute version of the essential facts. The first one was a beautiful in my view, but way too long. And there are plans for the future. There's not the money there yet, but there are plans to produce more documentaries on parts of this, very short ones, and aimed at the level that we can get. So yes, I think it's part of the education process. I think the greatest part of the education process is us realizing that we've got to change. But the So Eating Away to Extinction is certainly ongoing. It's been translated into, I think, 16 different languages. We've got all sorts of celebrity endorsements and so on. And there've been releases as late last year in different language speaking audiences, in having a voiceover in that language by a celebrity in that language. So it's still going. It's definitely still going. But I think it's there's so many good, so much good information out there now that people can no longer ignore it. I think The Game Changers was a good documentary, and that they claim that was the most watched documentary ever. So I think the message is getting through.
Last year we had a speaker named Captain Paul Watson, and he said a very simple thing. He said, if the oceans die, we die. And, I guess between ocean acidification and the coral reefs dying and the overfishing, he was saying that we're doing great damage. So do you want to comment on that, what he was saying? Do you know what he meant when he said, if the oceans die, we die? Do the oceans provide oxygen for us? And how are we killing the oceans? What are we doing to create this ocean acidification?
Well, perhaps I can start that answer. There are now 300 to 400 permanent ocean dead zones around the world. They're mostly out off estuaries, big rivers. The Gulf of Mexico is a classic. But now the open oceans are starting to lose oxygen as well. And it's been linked with previous mass extinctions that we have the oceans have been losing their oxygen. So this is very concerning to those who look at that. But we've been using the oceans as our dump, as our rubbish receptacle, and we've trashed the oceans. The world's continental shelves have been bottom trawled, and bottom trawling is incredibly destructive to those ecosystems. We've now, if you eat fish, you'll notice that every so often the fish that you used to eat no longer available. The reason for that, we've fished them out. So we move on to the next species. We go deeper in the ocean. We go further out away from shore. And as Professor Eshel said before, it costs more to get out there in fuel, etc. But in Australia, there's a species called orange ruffy, and that was the replacement for a few other species that were missing. So orange ruffy turns out to be a deep water fish that grows to more than 100 kilos, and it lives for more than 100 years. And guess what? We've done away with them too. So 90% or so of the large fish, the fish we eat, are now gone. So we've got to realize we've been trashing the oceans for so long that and polluting them. Look at all the plastic in the oceans now, the microplastics, the great garbage patches in the Pacific Ocean that just swirl around collecting more garbage, and ecosystems, it turns out. But we've got to change that. That the oceans have been. We can't. When the kid turns 8 and we give them a fishing rod for their birthday, how ridiculous is that? What are we saying to them? You used to be able to go out and fish and catch fish. You can't anymore. But what are we doing? This is ridiculous. We've got to change.